Hi, everybody that's joining. So I'm Lisa Andreozzi, I'm joining from Florence. I was the youth advisor on the consent project. And if anybody wants to chip in and tell us what their name is and where they're joining from, you can do so in the chat on the left hand, on my computer at least. I hope we all have kind of the same layout. And we'll wait a second for everybody to join in, and then we'll start with the presentations and the review of the agenda and our day's business. So for today's agenda, we will have some institutional words from Rosanna Di Gioia in the first part at 10:10. And then we will have the partners of the consent project tell us a bit about their work and how they went about that. So we'll have the first two contributions from 10:30 to 11:10, and then a Q&A session, just 10 minutes. And after the Q&A, a short break at 11:20, from 11:20 to 11:30. After the break, we're going to come back with the partners. So we're going to listen from CAM and Connexus. And then after these two, we're going to have another short Q&A session. So please, if you have any questions, any remarks, leave them in the chat and we can go back to them for either of these interventions. So either the first one or the second one, just put them in the chat and we will get to them. After the second Q&A, there's going to be a panel, which is going to be coordinated by Martina Fontana. And after the panel, which is half an hour long, at 12:50, we are going to go on a lunch break, which is going to be an hour long. And so we're going to meet back at 13:50, 1:50 p.m. And we're going to warm up with some games, and then we'll go over the agenda again. So don't worry. So this is for the morning. So the first speaker today is Rosanna Di Gioia. She is part of the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and she is a scientific officer in the domain of children's online safety, with a focus on child sexual abuse and exploitation perpetration prevention. Wow. And on the consent project, she was an advisory board member. So I will leave the floor to her.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and good morning, everybody. So, dear participants, I'm happy and honored to extend a warm welcome to our event, Building a Constructive Dialogue with Teenagers on Safe and Enjoyable Intimacy for Self and Partners to promote gender equality and prevent sexualized abuse. Today, I'm privileged to represent multiple roles simultaneously. First of all, as Lisa said, I am a social scientist at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. The Joint Research Center is the in-house scientific and knowledge service of the European Commission, and our mission is to provide scientific-based results to the entire policy cycle. Secondly, I'm here as a part of the Consent Project, the exceptional team and committed team with whom I have had the pleasure to collaborating as member of the advisory board. And last but not the least, I'm here as a mother of two adolescents, and thus I'm here as an educator. By acknowledging these roles, I aim to underline the importance of collaboration and collective responsibility in addressing these issues on violence and children's sexual abuse and exploitation. Each role provides a unique viewpoint and a set of responsibilities. And by recognizing this, I hope to convey the idea that protecting young people online is not the sole responsibility of one group or one organization, but rather a shared responsibility that requires input and action from all parts in the society. This event is happening within the framework of the Consent Project, an EU-founded initiative under the EU Citizens' Equality, Rights and Value, said also SERV program. In today's rapidly changing world, it is imperative to engage in open and constructive conversations with teenagers about intimacy, consent, and healthy relationships. By promoting gender equality and preventing sexualized abuse, we can create a safer and more inclusive society for all. Unfortunately, children are often the silent victims of various forms of violence, including physical, psychological, or sexual abuse, bullying, grooming, discrimination, and intolerance, domestic violence, human trafficking, and much more. According to the World Health Organization in Europe, it is estimated that 44 million children suffer from physical abuse, 80 million from sexual abuse, and 700 children are murdered yearly. According to UNICEF statistics, every 10 minutes somewhere in the world, an adolescent girl dies as a result of a violence. The European Union has proposed measures to address these challenges, including the well-known Istanbul Convention, the EU Gender Equality Strategy for 2020-25, with the recent directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence, the EU Strategy for a Better Internet for Kids, with the recent Digital Service Act, the EU strategy on the rights of the child, the EU strategy for a more effective fight against child sexual abuse, and the directive on combating sexual abuse and sexual exploitation and child pornography. Additionally, the EU has launched campaigns and programs to promote healthy and respectful relationships among youth, emphasizing the importance of consent and mutual respect, which perfectly aligns with the goals of this consent project. Together with collaborative approaches, education and trainings, dialogue and participatory research that foster children's rights to be heard and taken into account seriously, as it happens in the consent project thanks to the establishment of the Youth Advisory Board, we can build the ground to prevent and fight violence against children. And we will learn more during this event. And we are honored to have esteemed speakers and experts in the field who will provide valuable insight and strategy for engaging with teenagers on these important topics. So without further ado, I pass the floor to my colleagues. We eagerly welcome your active participation and contribution to this event. Thank you for joining and enjoy the event.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. That was very enlightening. And so we're going to leave the floor to today's first speakers, Berta Val and Jaume Granet, from the Blanquerna Ramon Llull University. So Berta is an associate professor at the Faculty of Psychology, Education and Sports Science at the Blanquerna Ramon Llull University in Barcelona. She has an extensive experience in research on gender-based violence and specifically on the programs for perpetrators of domestic violence. On the Consent Project, she was the coordinator, a very important role for us all. And Jaume is clinical psychologist and data analyst. He also works at the Blanquerna Ramon Llull University. He was a coordinating team member on the Consent Project. And today they're going to tell us a bit about addressing digital risks and combating sexualized violence, normalization for teenagers, emotional development, and healthy relationships. So please take it away.
Thank you. We're going to try and share the screen. Great. I hope you can all see it well. Thank you for the introduction and the presentation, Lisa. So good morning, everyone. As Lisa has already mentioned, the title of our presentation is Addressing Digital Risks and Combating Sexualized Violence Normalization for Teenagers' Emotional Development and Healthy Relationships. So in this presentation, first, I will describe the project. I will review the background of the project, the objectives, but also the main actions that we developed throughout the project. Then my colleague Jaume will review the procedure that we follow to develop two of the main project actions, the outcomes of these actions, and also the feedback of the participants. And finally, I will review the main achievements and outputs of the project. So moving on to the first part of this presentation, the consent project, as it has already been mentioned by Rosanna, was funded by the European Commission under the Daphne program. It had a duration of 2 years and it will finalize now in March. 4 countries have collaborated in this project: Italy, Sweden, Germany, and Spain, being Italy and Spain the 2 main implementing countries. So the 2 main countries where we have implemented most of the activities of the project. This project has 6 different partners. As you can see here, we have the logos of all the partners. Each of the partners that are part of this consortium have different expertise. For example, we have research partners that has expertise on research. We have partners that have expertise on working with victims of gender-based violence, or working with perpetrators of gender-based violence. And also we have experts on digital risks and online safety. So as for the background of this project, when we started this project 2 years ago, when we started writing it nearly 3 years ago, we wanted to develop this project because we identified some trends or some needs that we thought that they require to be fulfilled or answered. So first of all, the standpoint of the project is the understanding that pornography is an industry that normalizes violent and abusive behavior towards women. Second, research has shown that in Spain, the age of first access to pornography can be at 8 years old. And in Italy, research has shown that this first consumption can be at 10 years old. This is usually an involuntary access to pornography. Also, other research suggests that when children get to from 13 to 17 years old, this pornography consumption becomes mostly voluntary. Third, since the COVID-19 crisis and the lockdown situation, the online activity increased, and this has also resulted in an increase in pornography consumption in children and adolescents. Fourth, parent and children sexual communication is still poor nowadays. There is a lot of research that tries to describe how this communication goes, and they show that it's really poor still nowadays. And therefore, there is the risk that internet and pornography become the new sex educator. Fifth, still many teachers and educators do not feel qualified to work on the prevention of gender-based violence. And nearly 1/3 of these professionals consider that working to preventing gender-based violence is not really part of their role. So considering all of these aspects, we established 3 different goals in the consent project to try to fulfill these needs that we identified. So our first objective was to promote healthy gender roles, equality, and consensual behaviors among young people in their relationships. The second objective was to prevent gender-based violence among young people, with a special focus on sexualized violence and how this might be connected to pornography consumption. And finally, we also aimed at reducing the impact of internet on premature sexualization, hypersexualization, and also sexism attitudes. So, what did we do in the project to try to achieve these aims? Which were the main actions of the project? Okay, so first of all, we did a review of the existing training programs for adults that would focus on children pornography consumption and also sexoaffective education. So we try and do a desk research to see what were the programs that were already existing and that were working well. And then all of the partners will receive training on this specific topic. Second, we developed and we also implemented a training for teachers and also for parents as the main relevant adults and educative agents of the children. And this training was focused on online safety, pornography consumption, and also sex-affective education for the students or the children. My colleague Leticia will explain more about this training in a moment. Third, we developed and also implemented an educational program for children and young people to promote healthy gender roles, as I was mentioning before, to promote equality and also consensual relationships. With the main aim also to prevent gender-based violence and specifically sexualized violence. This will also be described by my colleague Laia in the following presentation. And finally, we developed and we are currently implementing 2 campaigns. One campaign is targeting adults, mainly teachers and parents and other educative agents. And the objective of this campaign is to raise awareness on these topics. And the other campaign is targeting young people to help. The objective is to help them become critical agents on these topics. So all of these actions have been underpinned by a participatory approach, and we have included the target groups of each of these activities in the development and in the inception of these activities. So I will now give the floor to my colleague Jaume.
Thank you so much, Berta. So how did we achieve these actions 2 and 3? Basically, giving the voice to all the final beneficiaries throughout all the process. Firstly, we designed a specific ad hoc questionnaires and focus groups for the assessment of the needs of the parents, the teachers, and the children. Also, for the effectiveness assessment of the training for adults and the program implementation with youngsters, we used a pre-post evaluation through ad hoc questionnaires for each target group specifically designed, and also validated tests as the parent-child sex communication inventory scale and Myths of Romantic Love scale, but this one only for youngsters. Last but not least, as you can see here in the point number 3, following a collaboratory approach, as Berta said, we have had youth advisory panels before, during, and after the program implementation in order to receive their feedback, giving voice to them, and also to empower them. This more detailed information about these youth advisory panels will be explained later on by our colleague Laia. On the other hand, in what follows, I will focus on the main outcomes of the needs assessment, the training for teachers and parents, and also the consent implementation program. What were the main needs that parents and teachers highlighted? The most important dimensions were the following, basically online safety, specifically the lack of knowledge about prevention tools for children. Also, the second dimension was pornography use or consumption, let's say, regarding the negative effects of its consumption, also the starting age of consumption by minors, and finally the type of sexual consent that children consume. Regarding the effective sexual education, this was another specific need that we identified, and specifically regarding the topics of sexual consent, gender stereotypes, and sexual orientation. In this sense, we also identified that the main difficulty for adults was the lack of references on how to deal with it. And finally, we identified the need of tips for a better communication about sexuality and pornography. Then, how kind of impact did the training had? We are very, very happy because we saw that knowledge has increased transversally in all these four domains that we identified as main needs. Also, we obtained an increase of the awareness of the negative impact of pornography on healthy and pleasurable sexuality. Therefore, a significant increment in the readiness to discuss about pornography with minors, becoming then good sexual educators. And finally, the training has also increased their confidence in answering questions about sexuality and also engaging conversations about it. In this sense, we have obtained an increase in the parent-child sex communication inventory for parents. Also, in terms of the implementation of the program, first of all, regarding the specific validated tests that we already mentioned, you can see here very interesting outcomes because in the same line of the adult outcomes, we have obtained also increment of the parent-child sex communication according to minors, and that is really important because that was one of the main objectives of the project. I mean, promoting this communication about sex between parents and children. Also, we obtained a significant reduction of the myths of romantic love in children, and we think that this could indicate a greater promotion of health gender roles. On the other hand, as you can see here, according to pre-post evaluation of the ad hoc questionnaires, we have obtained a significant increase in these dimensions presented in this word cloud. Note that the biggest ones represent the ones which we have obtained a higher impact and statistically significant change. And as you can see, then specifically, youngsters increased a critical view of gender stereotypes and women's sexualization in pornography. Also, a greater conscientiousness of negative effects of porn and also the normalization of sexual violence in pornography, as well as an improvement in the ability of communication and consent, looking for researchers and support if they need, and the positive aspects of the sexual health. Then, how was the feedback that we have received about these specific actions of the project? We're really happy because we have obtained a 96% of parents and teachers satisfied with the training and with the materials they got. And also, as you can see in these quotes, the youngsters were also satisfied, and most of them give good feedback of the consent program with regards to, for example, getting a deeper understanding of consent, talking about porn and sexuality in a free and safety way without taboos, and last but not least, putting in the shoes of the other genders. Thank you, Berta.
Okay, thank you, Jaume. So apart from these specific outcomes of these two main activities that we have implemented in the project, we also want to review in more general terms the main achievements of the project. And they can be divided in these four dimensions, as you can see here: the activities that we have implemented, the institutional impact that the project has had, the research that we have developed in the context of the project, and also the dissemination actions. So I'm not going to review all of these areas in detail because in the following presentations, my colleagues will describe them, but I want to highlight some specific achievements for each of them. So as for the main activities, we reached nearly 1,500 participants in all our trainings and educational programs. So 1,500 participants have gone through our consent training and educational programs. We were also able to engage several institutions in our project activities. We did joint press releases, we did joint press conferences with municipalities. We also are preparing a final workshop in Spain with the presence of relevant policymakers that will do also short speeches in our final workshop. We also did several presentations at stakeholder meetings and scientific conferences, and we have also received interest from other schools that were not part of the consent project at the beginning, and that they are also interested in being part of the consent project. So we have reached this interest beyond, let's say, the participants of the consent project. In terms of research, we have collected nearly 1,000 surveys. We have prepared 2 scientific research articles, and we have 3 more that are in the process of being prepared. And finally, the dissemination outreach of the consent project has also been really good. We reached more than 6,000 people through our actions, and we developed several creative dissemination activities and resources that will also be reviewed more in detail in a following presentation. So as for the main outputs, again, they will be described more in detail in the following presentations, but I want to mention them jointly, let's say, in this slide now. We have developed a report with the results of the mapping of the best practices on different training programs on pornography and sexo-affective education that are available at the European and at the international level. We have also developed a manual for families and teachers to increase their knowledge on online safety, pornography consumption, and sex-affective education. We also have developed 2 educational toolkits to promote gender equality and prevent gender-based violence in young population. We have created a great project website that I'm sure it will be also reviewed later on, and that you can access at any moment also. And finally, we are in the process of developing recommendations for institutions as a call to action and to respond to these societal challenges that we have nowadays. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, we will be more than happy to answer them after the following presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very interesting. I applaud you for this 96% of satisfaction rate, which is incredible. And also the outreach of the whole project is pretty mind-blowing. When we started working 3 years ago, we were could only hope of these kind of numbers. So thank you for your work, and thank you for this presentation, which was very interesting. And now we're going to move on. We can welcome the 2 following speakers, which are Cornelia Björkqvist. I apologize for my pronunciation. She is a member of Unizon in Sweden. Her role in Unizon is an expert on sexual exploitation and sexual crimes. And in Consent, she was our project coordinator. So thank you for being here. And joining her is going to be Natalia Batinkova. Again, sorry for my pronunciation. A member as well of Unizon in Sweden, where she works as an international project manager. In Consent, she was an expert. She has been working for many years with the issue of sexualized violence and exploitation of women and girls, specifically focusing on prostitution, pornography, and webcamming. And they're going to take us through the unmasking of rape culture and pornography's influence on youth, strategies and best practice for effective responses. So I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Lisa. Great pronunciation. My name is Cornelia Björkqvist, and I work as an expert in sexual crime and sexual exploitation at Unizon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalia, and I'm an international project manager at Unizon.
And we will speak about unmasking rape culture and pornography's influence on youth. So first, short about Unizon. Unizon is a national association in Sweden gathering women's shelters, youth empowerment centers, and support services specialized in sexualized violence and incest. So our member organizations work with support, protection, advocacy, and violence prevention. And they do this based on their knowledge of violence, gender, and power, and the relationship between it. All our work is based on experiences of our member organizations' meetings with women and girls subjected to men's violence.
Yes, and also it is important to say that our member organizations that work with young women and youth constitute one of the biggest actors that meet children and young people online in Sweden. So yeah, our experience and experience of our member organizations make it clear for us that when we work with men's violence against women, when we try to, when we work with response and prevention of it, we need to start with the basics. We need to define the issues that we work with. We need to talk about who is perpetrating violence, who is subjected to violence, and to be clear about it. And also, when we work with sexualized violence, it's important to have or create a better understanding of the basic notions. For instance, what sex is, what we mean when we talk about violence and sexualized exploitation, what we mean exactly when we talk about consent, and what is pornography. Because our experiences truly show that, especially when we talk to young women and young boys, there is no clear understanding of the difference between violence and sex or sexual acts. And here you have one example from our member organization and the help seeker who said, I've always thought it is unclear what sexualized abuse is, and I have never talked about it in this way. I have just expressed my frustration and fear over what I have been subjected to, calling it macho boys take the liberty of doing so. It feels important to know what it actually is. So that's why we think that all the work addressing sexualized violence and preventing sexualized violence needs to start with that. And also one of the basic things or the baselines that we think it's important to talk about is sexual health, because why are we working with the prevention of sexualized violence? Why are we working with pornography and its harms? It's because we want to promote better sexual health and promote sexual rights among specifically children, young girls and boys. So here we think it's crucial to understand what sexual health is, and especially talk about positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships. And stressing on that sex should be a pleasurable and safe experience, free from coercion, discrimination, and violence.
Yes, and another basic part is also defining what violence is. It's really important to know what we're talking about and what we are preventing. So one definition that we use is from the UN Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, which is any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. So we want to show that violence is the direct opposite to safety, respect, and pleasure, as Natalia said. And it is also forcing someone or threatening someone to do something that they want to do or not to do something that they want to do. So we also have a quote here from a woman who puts it well. I used to define violence as beatings, rape, and sexual abuse. Now I see it as anything that infringes on my rights to be treated as a human being. It's also important to define consent and to know what we are talking about. We hear this phrase a lot, but it's really important to know like what aspects are needed for it to be. Here are some of the basic components that needs to be fulfilled, and also if one is not fulfilled, there is no consent, so they all need to be in place at the same time. So consent cannot be given as a result of physical violence. It cannot be given on the substance abuse. It cannot be received through use of coercive power and control, and it should be explicit. So no means no, and absence of yes means no. And one also very important part is that it cannot be bought and sold. So if you are given it in exchange of money or something else, there is no consent because you cannot buy consent.
Okay, moving to the topic of pornography, it's also important to start with how we understand and define pornography. For that, we can start with looking at the origins of this word that already can give us a good idea of what pornography is and what it represents. Here you can see it. Porne means female slaves sold for prostitution, while graphene means to write or to illustrate. So that is a pretty telling origin of the word. Also, talking about pornography, we will go into details a little bit later, but talking about pornography, it is important to understand what it is and what it is not. Pornography is not about consent, it's not about respect and equality between women and men. As Dr. John Fubert put it, pornography is a recipe for rape. It essentially teaches that you are supposed to be violent when you are intimate with somebody. And here we can really talk about portraying of violence in pornography. There are years and years of research, both on different national levels like Sweden or the United States, but also internationally that show how violent pornography is. Here you can see some statistics. For instance, according to the research, almost 90% of the most popular scenes in the mainstream pornography contain physical violence. Almost half of the scenes contain verbal aggression. Also, what is very important to stress is that women that are subjected to all this violence and aggression in pornography react neutrally or even positively to that. Which also creates a certain script or a certain understanding of how you should react to violent acts. Pornography also is promoting and reinforcing racism and sexism. At the same time, what we don't see in pornography is any conversation about consent, no conversation about condom use and prevention or risks for STDs and other risks associated with sexual acts. Also, it doesn't show closeness, intimacy, curiosity, and joy that we all want to have in the sexual relationships. And it doesn't teach us respect and equality.
Okay, so now we will talk some about examples of violent acts. I won't go into detail, but here we can clearly see some of them, and these are not hard to find. It's very easy and very accessible, both for young people and adults. So what we want to say is that you don't need to watch pornography to understand what kind of violence it shows. We know this. There's a lot of research behind it as well. And also, it's very graphic descriptions of violence, as you can see here. And it's very important to be aware of that these kind of violent acts are happening and are in pornography. And not because you have to mention them all or talk about them in detail with young people, but because you need to be aware of the seriousness of the issue so we can come together and fight this problem together. So yeah, here we have some examples from Pornhub, a very known pornographic website. And also we have an example of how the pornography industry is targeting children through cartoons. So this is an example of a hypersexual cartoon picture that is very easy for young people to find online. And also an example of how they use this as a gateway for young people to, or for children to start watching pornography. Yeah.
Yes, and it is, as Cornelia said, very important to know how pornography looks like, to understand the violence that is happening and that is shown in pornography, because it affects us all in general, and it affects young people in particular. We know that pornography is very much normalized and widespread in the societies all over the world. We have some statistics here, mostly from Sweden and the United States. The colleagues from Blanca already named that the youngsters in Italy and Spain started watching pornography very early, at the age of 10 in Italy and 8 in Spain. In the US and also similar numbers in Sweden. We know that 1/3 of young people have seen pornography by the age of 12. Also we see that more and more young people, and especially boys, watch pornography frequently. So they can be described as frequent users, which means that they watch every day or even several times a day. Then it is also important to mention what the attitudes toward watching pornography are. For instance, we have numbers from the organization Men in Sweden that had a study in 2021 that showed that 7 out of 10 boys believe that other boys have a positive attitude towards pornography, which also pushes them to show that they like it too. But at the same time, the same study showed that 4 out of 10 boys would like to watch less pornography. Then talking a little bit, or starting talking a little bit about the effects of pornography, we see how normalized, let's say, spreading the nudes, sending nude pictures is. And here in Sweden, we have the statistics according to which 1/3 or 1/3 girls have been asked to send nudes at least once. Knowing this, we understand how important it is to talk about this issue with the youngsters. And yet, the research that was done in Sweden back in 2014 showed that none of the young people that were interviewed for this research ever talked to an adult about what they have seen in pornography. We hope, of course, that the situation got better, because Unizone and other organizations worked a lot to improve the situation, but still we don't believe that the numbers are much higher. Here it is really crucial to understand how needed these kind of conversations are. Our member organizations that work with young women and youth receive a lot of questions that are pornography related, and they receive a lot of testimonies about how the use of pornography affects the youngsters' lives. So here you have some examples of what kind of questions the youngsters address us with. How can it hurt less? Why can't I just get her to like it? My boyfriend watches a lot of porn and wants me to do all this stuff he sees. Do I have to agree to be strangled? So these are the very telling questions that give us a picture of how young people are struggling to understand what is violence, what is okay, and how they can understand their own boundaries.
Yeah, so as we have talked about, and as we know, pornography consumption is very normalized in today's society. And we also see multiple harms of pornography from international research. And here are some examples that there is a strong connection between porn consumption and increased aggression. And this is regardless if the porn contains physical violence or not. We see obviously objectification of women. We have shown examples of that as well. And thousands of women and girls in Sweden alone have been exposed to porn-inspired violence by their partner. And Natalia had some examples in the last slide, but this is something that we see in our everyday work, and our member organizations meet all the time, that you want to talk about and you feel very bad about what you have been subjected to. And they also see the clear connection to pornography or their partner's pornography consumption, for example. So this is something that we meet every day and we really need to talk about. And also the connection to prostitution now when we have those effects of the pornography consumption. Pornography consumption makes young boys more likely to exploit women in prostitution. We know that men who use more pornography are also statistically more inclined to purchase sex than other men. Younger men start purchase women. This is something we hear, not the least from the police in Sweden here. They also tell us that groups of young men purchase women and that they show indifference to violence against and sufferings of women in prostitution. So the police also tells us that they see these clear links and also like in the behavioral changes to the porn consumption. They also tell us that they very often find a lot of pornography in sex buyers' phones. So they do not hesitate at all about the connection.
Yes, I'm going back to how pornography affects young women and girls. There were testimonies, as I earlier mentioned, that our member organizations receive, but also there are forums where young women share about their experiences and try to help each other. So here are some examples from one of these forums. I will read the quotes because they are very telling and we think it's important to read them. Once we had sex, he suddenly took out his mobile phone and started watching porn. He totally ignored me until finally he came. I was absolutely not important for him. I was there as a sex toy. Very telling example of objectification and kind of commodification of women that this young girl experienced, being, in her own words, treated as a sex toy. When I was 13, I dated a 25-year-old guy. He used to put on porn movies every time we were about to have sex and forced me to perform oral sex to him until I could no longer breathe. He used to say that all adult women do this. You don't want to be a child, do you? He used to say. We also think that it is important to find ways to talk about pornography production and not only pornography consumption with young people, because we see that more and more young women are getting lured into the pornography industry. And of course, they are experiencing devastating effects. In order to be able to talk about pornography production and to understand what we actually see on the screen, or what the youngsters see on the screen when they watch pornography, we need to talk about and help them understand who are these people that they see on the screen, how these people ended up there, and what are the harms that they are experiencing. And we truly need to hear their voices. And of course, there is a challenge about the language, about the way we talk about these topics with the youngsters, but we believe, and our experience show, that these conversations are extremely important. And here we have two quotes from young women that were lured into industry. That is from the quite recent study from 2019 done in Sweden, and I want to stress this that these women were underage when they were lured into pornography. I think it's too easy to enter into the branch. It should be more difficult. All it takes is sending an email with a few pictures, and then suddenly you have a website where you are making money. I think more information needs to be spread about what can happen once you actually enter into the industry. So that is, again, show us how important it is to talk about the realities of the pornography production. I think there are many girls in the industry who feel the need to receive affirmation because they feel horrible on the inside. And soon we will talk about it a little bit more, but thinking about what this girl is talking about is also correlates a lot about with the youngsters' behavior on social media. They want to be visible, they want to get confirmation, they want to get popular, and of course the pornography industry is very much aware about it, and is using this urge from youngsters to get them into the pornography industry.
Yeah, so one big part of this, which is also important to include in the discussion about pornography, is the pornography culture. We have some examples here from how present it is in our today's everyday life. We see scenes in TV series, for example, that back in the days would have been in pornography sites, but now we see them in very famous, well-known TV series. And we see how the culture is changing and is affected by the pornography industry. So this is, of course, whether you consume pornography or not as well. You are a part of this, and you take part of all this information and these pictures. It's objectification of women, and it's normalization of men's violence against women. This is also in music videos, games, and commercials, and so on. These pictures, and to seeing them, we met by this all the time, it affects our attitudes and it affects our behavior as well. And one big part of this, of course, especially for young people, is social media. We see here an example of the most famous platforms where the age limit is 13 plus. We know that this is a very big part of young people's lives, and also a lot of pictures are shared, sexualized images are shared on themselves or on others on these sites. And they also create groups to share these pictures, for example. And this is also something that is exploited by the pornography industry, since they use this to lure young women into the industry. For example, through OnlyFans, which is an example of a platform that looks like Instagram, for example, like a bit like Instagram, but function very differently. And then they use this to recruit and exploit women and girls into prostitution. We also need to talk about and see how the gaming industry is part of this, and the lack of responsibility that is taken from the companies. We see the objectification of women in characters. We have one example of here. There are many examples. And also know that young people do not talk about this, and adults are not aware of what young people meet in games. The gaming platforms are also huge for children, and they can also be exploited there. For example, it's very common to send images of themselves or being asked to send pictures in exchange for skins or other stuff that includes in games.
Yeah, so as Dr. Gail Dines, which is a well-known Canadian researcher who's been working with the topic of pornography for over 30 years, in her book Pornland, she quotes a pornography producer who put it very simply, but very kind of straightforward. The culture did a lot of grooming for me. And the examples that Cornelia talked about, they truly show how social media normalizes this hypersexualization, subjectification of women, how it reinforces the self-sexualization of women, promoting or kind of forcing, making it popular to share nude images on their platforms. How these platforms normalize pornography, and how at the end these platforms become a gateway to pornography industry. And unfortunately, what we see right now is that the adult world that actually created the problem doesn't take enough responsibility to protect children and youngsters from the harms of pornography and from the pornography culture that surrounds us. And taking this responsibility means, first of all, to acquire knowledge on the topic, and also read this knowledge or use this knowledge to initiate conversation first among the adults and then between the adults and young people. And that's a lot of things that should be done in order to change the situation, and in order for the adult world to take this responsibility in the right way. And we realize that pornography is a complex issue, and it needs complex measures. For instance, it's not enough to develop materials or programs to talk to young people about pornography and its harms. And it's not only enough to introduce some technical solutions or tools that would limit pornography's young people's access to pornography. Instead, we need to be strategic here, and we need to tackle the issue from different angles and on different levels. We just tried to put it very simply, very briefly here, what kind of measures we should introduce and how they should correlate with each other. Of course, we need to have some legislative initiatives and a change in legislation that would be consent, like promoting consent, that would be pornography critical, and that would be critical of the whole industry of exploitation, sexualized exploitation of women, girls, and others. Also, we need to work a lot on prevention. And that means that we need to develop training and to provide resources for responsible adults, for teachers, for parents, and for other professionals working with children and youth in order to really equip them with the tools and materials so that they are confident talking about this subject with young people. We need to initiate on a regular basis pornography critical conversations and educations, and sex education is something that we really need to focus on, and the role of schools here is crucial, and that's what actually consent is tackling, and we are very glad that we could be part of this. Of course, like I said earlier, that it's not only enough to introduce the technological tools to limit the access, but they are also important. Unfortunately, we know that only technological tools are not enough, because we can find your ways around it. But introducing these tools can have the normative effect, because you were showing that access to pornography is something that is not good for children. And also, because we know that pornography has devastating effects, both when it comes to consumption, the effects of consumption of pornography, but also the effects of being in the pornography production, we think it's crucial to have a support system for those who are experiencing the harms of pornography and need to do something about it. So we need to provide this trauma-informed holistic support to women, girls, and others exploited in pornography and subjected to its harms because of the consumption. So yeah, that was practically it for us, and we want to end up saying that we truly need to take our responsibility as adults and to start talking to our children about pornography, because if we don't do this, the pornography industry will definitely will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was very, very interesting. I found very frightening the data that 0% of kids talked to adults about what they saw, and also the very graphic titles that you put on, I think really helped us focus on what we are actually talking about and going back to the basics of what consent is. So thank you very much for that. It was much needed, I think. And now let's move on to the Q&A, shall we? So maybe we can put back on the screen our speakers. And our first question is going to be for Rosanna, which spoke first. And the question is, what practical role can EU policies play in the response to the early sexualization of children through the internet? Let's try to keep it a bit brief, because we have some questions and we would like to go on a break at 11:20. Thank you.
The EU is tackling the issues several angles. So we provide, first of all, we try to work on legislation, as the colleagues were saying that before. Then it is providing coordination. So, for instance, with the national EU member states. And then, of course, fundings. So these are the three strands where the EU is supporting the fight and the prevention against child sexual abuse and exploitation, but also gender-based violence. I hope that I've responded to the question.
Okay, if anybody has any questions they want to ask, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will look them over while we're answering the other questions. And the second question is for Berta and Jaume, and it is, what do you think are the most relevant results from the project regarding the way educators and carers approach the topic?
Jaume, I don't know if Jaume is also here with me. Yes. So, yeah, I would say the main results for us, it was very interesting when we did the needs assessment to really identify. I mean, we found that there was motivation, especially from teachers and professors, to know more about how to deal with sex-affective education and with pornography consumption with their students. So we expected more resistance, let's say, on that. They were really eager to learn and to know about it. But it's also true that then when we had to implement educational programs with young people in the schools, with the children, then some resistance appeared. So that was also kind of quite enlightening for us. So the conclusion was that probably they need further support and more time also to feel enough ready to implement some of the actions in the class. And about the main results, I think that this is what we have not explained before, because Jaume has already reviewed some of the main results. I would say this is the main takeaway for us. And for the children, basically the need to talk and discuss about these topics. So sometimes as adults, there is this fear that if we start talking about these topics, they will, I don't know, try and do something that they didn't think about, or that we would give ideas. But also another learning point is that when you start to talk about these topics with kids, you usually are more late than early. So, we shouldn't have this fear, I would say.
That's very interesting. Something that came up a lot when we were talking about it. This idea that we might give some ideas. And okay, and then there's a follow-up, well, not follow-up, but it's another question for the two of you. And it's if you have noticed any significant difference in the two pilot contexts, like Spain and Italy, if there were differences.
Yes, do you want to say something, Jaume, or you want me to? I mean, what we found is that the way we implemented the educational program for children in schools was a bit different between the two countries. So in Spain, we trained the teachers, and then we did some follow-up with them individually, but the teachers implemented the educational program in the class alone, so to say. And in Italy, CAM, which is the implementing partner in Italy, they entered the class and they did the implementation directly with the children. So we found that the level of satisfaction of the children was higher in general in Italy. So yeah, so this is also the learning point. Is connected to what I was saying before. So it's really important to have experts also delivering these educational programs with children, and children really notice that, because if they see that the adults are kind of hesitating or restraining themselves from doing or saying some specific things, then they really notice it very fast. So that's the main difference, I would say, about the implementation, because the training for adults, for families and teachers, it was quite similar. The impact and the results that we got were pretty similar. The needs were very similar also. Yeah, so I would say it's pretty much this, which has to do with the way we did the implementation also.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we're going to hear a bit more about the Italian part maybe with the next partners when they are going to speak after the break. Mm-hmm. So we have now a question for Natalia and Cornelia. And I'm going to ask if there are any initiatives in Sweden that work well with young men to help them deal with pornography's impact on their intimacy and relationships, if you know about, or if you do them.
Thank you very much for this question. There was one organization, or there is one organization on advisory board, the organization MEN, and we will hear from them later today, that have done a lot of work with young men on the topic of pornography and the harms of pornography. So Karen will talk about it, but they've had a specific project dedicated to the work with young men in this regard. Also, like our member organizations, they are working with young women and youth. So there are organizations that are not only working with girls and young women, but with boys also. There are member organizations that we're working with both chats and even group meetings and one-to-one consultations. on the topic of the harms of pornography and how pornography affects the sexual life and the behaviors of young men. For instance, one of the organizations is Tusen möjligheter, Thousand of Opportunities, here in Stockholm. And also we think that, like, let's say the first step, or one of the first steps that the professionals working with children and youth, no matter girls or boys, one of the first steps is to initiate the conversation. But also we realize that teachers and let's say teachers, school personnel, that they are not equipped with the whole range of tools to address, like, a problem of the harms of pornography on a deeper level. That's why one of the things that we think is important is to provide the teachers and other professionals working with kids and initiating these conversations with the information about the helping services that are that know how to address it on a deeper level. And also they should provide these contact details to the helping organizations. It is very much important to also to share this information in a right way, so that no one needs to approach a teacher, for instance, in front of the whole class and ask for help, but to have the discreet way of spreading the information. But it's very important to share it with youngsters.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. We have another last question for Berta and Jaume. It starts saying that this person would add that there is a hidden part of the phenomenon that has been studied during the project Boys and Culture of Care, founded by the EU. It seems that there are several reasons why boys are victims of sexual violence more than we imagine, but they are not able to talk about it because of gender stereotypes, fear of secondary victimization, social pressure, and also because they're not able to see themselves as victims because of their gender. Did you provide some in-depth information on this topic during the training, I guess?
So I guess he's talking about adult sexual violence towards minor boys, right? I think this is if I understood correctly.
Yeah, I think it's about violence towards boys and how they don't speak up about it because of.
So we were focusing more on the topic of pornography, which is clearly there's more violence towards women in terms of sexual violence. So that was more the focus. But it's true that obviously to discuss the topic of pornography or sexualized violence or sexoaffective education, we went a little bit backwards also, and we talked about gender roles, gender equality, and we had the discussion. We didn't focus that much, especially with the parents and the teachers, on the specific numbers, but we reflect together on how gender roles are also very damaging for young boys and how this has implications for young boys. Also in terms of watching pornography. So what are the implications and the challenges that this poses for young boys? And we had a lot of discussions about what are the reference adult men for these young boys. And we discussed a lot with the parents, male parents that were in the trainings, about their own sexoaffective education and how can we, also change where we come from and so on. So this was really an important part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you everybody for your answers, and they were very interesting and very interesting questions too, so please keep them coming. They were great. And I think we're gonna have a short break right now, so get up, grab a cup of coffee, and we'll meet again at 11:30 sharp. Hi everybody, welcome back. We are ready to move on to our next speaker. Very exciting another part of our day. So our next speaker is Camilla Tognoni. She is part of CAM, Centro Ascolto Uomini Maltrattanti, which is a perpetrator program in Florence. She is specialized in sexuology, and she took part in conducting the training with boys, teachers, and parents on issues related to consent, sexuality, and early access to online pornography. She is going to take us through the charting progress, needs assessment, and capacity building activities for parents and teachers with a consent manual. Please, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Lisa. Well, today I want to share with you the experience of CAM, our experience in the training for teachers and parents. The first step was to assess their needs. So we start to ask for their needs, and we had a lot of answer. The main needs was to know how to talk about sexuality and from what age to start talking about sexuality with their children, with their students. They want to know more about the risk of the online and want to know more how to protect their children, their students, how to talk about the risk of the online with them, and so on. They want to know more about the consent. We saw that lots of parents, lots of teachers does not more about consent. They are not really aware of how consent work in relationship, what consent is, and so on. So we had to put a lot of effort in teaching them this issue, this topic. And they want to know more about pornography. And it's quite funny. They came to us and asked, well, I think that if I talk about about pornography with my children, with my students, they start to be curious about it and search for porn online. So it's dangerous. And they do not know that most of their children, most of their students, they have already seen porn online. So it's really important they talk about it and give information about it. We also focus on the fears and the beliefs parents and teachers have around sexuality and around pornography. One of the main idea parents have is, okay, talking about sexuality with my children, it's not my problem. Schools, teachers have to talk about this topic. They are really afraid to say something wrong and traumatize children. They are really afraid of say something too soon and start speaking about sexuality too soon. But as Berta said before, maybe it's always too late that too soon. And another part of parents think that sex is something natural. So my children, my daughter, my son will let's say, will learn on his own or on her own. They start to approach sexuality and will figure out how it works. But it's not so so simple. Sexuality is not just a mechanical act. It includes also an affective aspect, also the identity, also consent, pornography, pleasure. So it's really it's more complex than just a natural sexual act. And other parents came to us and say, well, I watched pornography and nothing when I was young, and nothing worse or nothing bad has happened to me, but they do not really are aware of the critical aspect, the negative influence that pornography can have on children. So it's really important to underline what this negative aspect could be. Teachers are have lots of fear about talking about sexuality. For example, they are really afraid of say something wrong or something that parents could not approve. So they feel to be really careful about what to say and do not mistakes, and so they are really scared of talking about sexuality in class. they want to speak about sex, but only in a biological terms. So, okay, I just explain how reproduction works, how genital works, so I'm okay. But speaking about sexuality only in biological term is good, but not enough. There are a lot of aspects to cover. And it's funny that also teachers say it's not my role to speak about sexuality with children, with students. It's something parents should do. So they are opposite in this view. Okay, some statistical data. As you can see, we reached in Italy only 49 teachers. We had a lot of difficulties in reaching teachers, and in contrast to Spain, we reached a lot of parents, of course, but we had a lot of difficulties with teachers. And we hypothesize that it's because sexual education is not mandatory in Italy. We do not have a law that requires sex education at school. In Spain, there is a law. And so, and also teachers had not so much time to spend on these on other training. They do not want to take responsibility. Institutions do not want to enter in this topic that in Italy it's not a great topic to talk about. But what we see is that after some events, after some critical events, I'm referring to a group sexual violence that happened this summer in Palermo. Lots of schools, lots of teachers, lots of parents start to feel the relevance of the topic and want to know more about sexuality, sexual education, and how to explain these topics to their children, to their students. So they welcome more easily our intervention, and we managed to reach the 49 teachers and all these parents. Okay, now a little overview of the activity we have done during the training. We proposed 1, 2, or 3 meetings according and depending on the needs of the participant and of the time they had to give to us. We always use or try to use a practical and interactive way to convey information. We use a lot of interactive tools, and we try to stimulate a reflection on what sexuality is for them, what meanings they link to sexuality, what they think and what they know about pornography, what information and value they want to convey, to transmit to their children and their students. So we try to stimulate a really deep reflection on these topics. We covered a lot of topics. For example, we spend a lot of time on the topic of consent. That is a very relevant topic for teachers and for parents. And we try to explain it in a very easy and simple way. And we try to give parents and teachers lots of tools in order to explain this topic to their children, their students. We talk about pornography, and we try to provide parents with practical tools to talk about sexuality in general. With teacher, we cover mainly the same topics, but we have to adapt it a little bit in order they have another role. They are not parents, they are teachers, so we adapted a little bit, but we covered mainly the same topics. Here you can find some suggestions we gave to parents and teachers. We suggest, for example, to start talking about topics they feel more comfortable with, and start processing and continuing with the more challenging ones, step by step. To use age-appropriate materials, books, videos, and we suggest some books and videos. We suggest to talk about sexuality in a natural way, but paying a lot of attention on which term they decide to use, because lots of terms in Italy, for example, convey gender stereotypes or sexism. So they have to be really careful on which term they decide to use in speaking about sexuality. And lots of parents, lots of teachers are afraid to or came to us and say, well, and if I can answer the question of my children, of my students, okay, we say that this is a really important part of the process. In this case, they can take the opportunity to consult together with their children or with their students reliable sources and teach them how to find reliable sources and correct information about sexuality online. So it's really important to take the opportunity in this case. We suggest to adapt the topics to age. For example, with children from 9 to 12 years old, they can speak about boundaries, privacy, consent, social media, and so on. With teenagers, they can cover more topics, for example, pleasure and sexuality, pornography, sexting, toxic masculinity, men's violence against women, and so on. And here we can find a little video. It's a short video, just 3-minute video, and that explain consent. We use this video in order to explain consent to parents and teachers, and we suggest to use this video when they want to talk about consent with their students and with their children, because it's really simple. So let's try to watch it. I hope everybody can hear.
Struggling with consent. Just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, fuck yes, I would fucking love a cup of tea. Thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no, thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea. Okay? They might say, yes, please. That's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
Okay, hope you like it. I think it's really easy and it contains everything or the major thing you have to know about consent. So it's a really great tool to explain consent. And we use video also to break the ice and start a conversation about pornography with teachers and students. We use this really short video, 1-minute video, that is quite funny, I think, and it helps us breaking the ice. So hope Okay.
Hiya, I'm Sue. This is Derek. We're here because your son just looked us up online, you know, to watch us.
Matt, darling, there's some people here to see you. So he watches you online?
Yeah, you know, on his laptop.
iPad, PlayStation.
His phone, your phone.
Smart TV, projector.
Yeah, anyway, we usually perform for adults, but your son's just a kid. He might not know how relationships actually work. We don't even talk about consent, do we? Now we just get straight to it.
Yeah, and I'd never act like that in real life.
Yeah. Hey, Maddie. You're right.
Okay, Sandra, stay calm. You know what to do here. All right, Maddie. It sounds like it's time to have a talk about the difference between what you see online and real-life relationships. No judgment.
Many young Kiwis are using porn to learn about sex. Keep it real online. Get help and advice at keepitrealonline.govt.nz.
Okay, we use this video to underline the importance of speaking about pornography with children and with students. Here you can find some of the materials and the books we suggest to use to parents and teachers. Here are books in Italian, of course. This little yellow person, we use this as a tool to explain sexual identity, and so the difference between sex assigned to birth, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And we use these two silhouettes, the male and the female one, as an activity we suggest to parents and to teachers in order to explain consent to the youngest children and students. We suggest to take these two silhouettes and three markers, a red one, a green one, and a yellow one, and to mark with the red one the part of the body and to suggest to mark and to suggest to children and students to mark with the red one the part of the body they want not to be touched. The yellow one, the part that they are not sure if they want or not want to be touched, and the green one, the part they are okay if they are touched on. It's a little activity that it's really useful to start a conversation about consent, the body, the pleasure, or the boundaries of the body. So it's it's really useful for teachers and for parents. Okay, now a little focus on the results. I will go.
Yeah, just so you know, there's 2 minutes left. Thank you.
I'm really fast on this. Parents and teachers have to fill a questionnaire before and after the training. And as we can see, there's a lot of difference on their answer. Before the training, they were afraid to say something wrong and they feel shame and embarrassment in talking about sex and sexuality. After the training, they were more at ease in speaking about sexuality. They feel more confident on the topics, and they have a better understanding on a lot of topics. They can speak about pornography, about sexuality, and also they can they have a better understanding of how parental control work and how they can protect their children online. So it's really important to consider parents and teachers as the main, as important actor in sexual education. And so train them and give them the tools. It's really, really important because they are really important in sexual education of children and teens. Okay, thanks for your attention. And I finished it.
Thank you very much, Camilla. Sorry to barge in like that.
You're welcome.
I think it was very interesting. I think you went back also to those differences between Italy and Spain, which was asked about earlier. So I hope that answered all the questions. If you have any follow-up questions, please ask them in the chat. And I was very impressed by your attention to terms and also the biological aspect of that. That's kind of a way to prevent or to, you know, procrastinate talking about these topics in schools. I felt that very like personally on my school education, so I really thought that was very relevant. And the next speaker is Laia Argimon. She is with the Associazione Connexus. She is a psychologist specialized in sexual and gender-based violence, working with youth and adults. She is going to take us through engaging youth in consent's journey, youth advisory panels, and the development of the emotional and sexual education program. Thank you, Laia.
Thank you, Lisa. First of all, I need to say sorry. I'll try to speak out loud, but I don't have a voice today, but we'll try. I say sorry, and glad to be here because it means that we went throughout all the project. I'll talk about the youth advisory panel and this work with young people, and after that I'll talk about the toolkit, which, as Berta and Jaume said before, is one of the main outcomes of the project. So, first of all, I think it's important to mention why ask the youth and how or why for us in this project was so important to take into account youth perceptions and youth opinions, because adults, of course, have a responsibility in concerning sexual education or education in minors. And I think that we need to be aware that sexual education is a community issue. I mean, it involves all the community. However, sometimes adults um, talk about or propose some content or some ways to transmit the content that are not adapted to their experience or to their experience. So in that sense, I think it was a great idea to have their opinions and their contributions of the teenagers in a project like this. In addition to that, in a context such as the current one, at least the Catalan context, it was important for both adults and youngsters to work through the same objective, because sometimes adults think that the issue of consent, the issue of sexual education, or the issue of sexual violence or pornography consumption only affects youngsters. And I think it's unfair to the young people. So it was important for us to try to work together in the same direction. So that's the starting point. What we did it with the youth advisory panel. We took into like there were three schools, three secondary schools that were collaborating in youth advisory panels. So we created a group from youth from 12 to 16 years old. And they were, as I said, from different schools. So we think that it was kind of rich. It was rich to have boys and girls from different schools. To work towards the way that we use the youth contributions, the youth advisory panel, was to try to validate if the toolkit we were preparing or the toolkit we were prepared was appropriate enough and was adapted to their needs and to their expectations, and if it would be if it would add something in their education experience. So we prepared 4 meetings to validate the toolkit and to think in a collaborative way about the toolkit, and 1 extra meeting to evaluate the whole process. The whole process. So, moreover, in addition to that, it was important for us with Youth Advisory Panel to check or to reinforce the perceptions that we collect from the focus groups um, made before, and also we used their contributions to design some specific aspects in different activities planned on the toolkit. About the experience, especially at the beginning, it was remarkable that when we asked for their needs, they were also looking for something biological, or yeah, for the biological aspects of sexuality, which means that maybe this route we were taking, at least in the Catalan context, we are used to talk about some biological aspects of sexuality, but not about the whole complexity that sexuality involves, and these other aspects like emotional aspects, consent, or pleasure, and things like that. So at the beginning, when we asked them for their needs or their expectations, they wanted to talk more about these topics, which shows that uh, although we want in this project to address porn consumption, consent, or sexual violence, we need clearly more basics, and we need a complete route that can tackle and deepen on sexual education. So that we finally we could like move together to another position, and we started asking what were their needs in terms of consent, or in these other emotional aspects involved in sexuality or in sexual education. Apart from that, sorry, I missed to say that having a group from 12 to 11 to 16 years old allowed us to adjust the toolkit to different stages, because 12 to 16 in teens is a large spectrum of experiences and in terms of development. So, especially in youth advisory panel and also in focus group, the youth ask for two main aspects, or they have two main demands. One of them is, please talk clearly and concretely, because sometimes they feel that adults, when trying to tackle sexual education, um, we said social messages, but we cannot go deeper in those messages. So they demand to talk concretely and clearly about these topics. For example, they said like, okay, we know, we have an idea about what consent is. Okay, we know that we cannot do anything that the other person don't want to, but how do I know how consent is really done? I mean, so they ask us to speak very clearly. And there's another important point, to a remarkable point, and is that especially girls and women ask adults to um, put a boundary and put a limit and stop when any comment that can naturalize or legitimate sexual violence is done. Because sometimes when you start talking about these topics with groups, some comments like this can show up, and sometimes they feel that the adults responsible don't put a strong boundary to that kind of comments. Now I'll move on to the toolkit, the development of emotional and sexual education program. And I'll say some main aspects about the content, but I thought that it was more interesting to focus on the challenges and the challenges that this the elaboration and the development of this toolkit has involved. First of all, the content proposed, it was a challenge because we knew which was the main objective of the project, but also when we started to work on that, we saw and it was a reality that we needed a previous road. So they don't used to talk about sexuality, pleasure, consent, sexual violence. So we needed a previous route, and the limits or the boundaries of the project are to tackle some specific issues or some specific topics. On the other hand, we are at least in our content, or specifically in our context in Catalonia, usually when adults in schools talk about sexuality, they do it in terms of risk, danger, or as I said, in terms of biological or mechanical aspects. And they also used to talk about, or sometimes they talk about sexual violence, but they don't talk about other positive aspects of sexuality. So we understood that it could be a risk if we only address this program in terms of risk or danger, or because maybe we could be reinforcing this cultural background that we have in our context, as I said, at least. So we knew that we needed a previous content, a previous road. Another important aspect that I think that we need to mention, and actually Berta mentioned it before, is that we needed to develop a program that is for other adults to implement. It's for teachers to implement. So teachers, they don't need, or they don't need to be experts in sexual education, but they need to tackle some of the issues or topics that youth demand or ask. So it's been also a challenge, because for us it was very important that it was very important to make it clear that a positive sexual education needs to put boundaries to some comments, as I said before. So it was important to raise awareness about gender perspective in sexual education. And as I said, it's a toolkit made for us, for teachers to implement. Another challenge related to this is the time schedules and schools rhythm in order to co-create and create together in a complete collaborative way this program, which was the initial and the main purpose. And finally, I think it's important also, and I think it's very important to mention that developing this toolkit involved an internal review, involved a dialogue with our own fear and our own taboo. As I think it was Berta said before, okay, we shouldn't be afraid of arise the curiousness. For example, for pornography, if and we don't want to this to happen, but is it possible that we really have that fear? Is it possible that we are also tackling with this? So developing this program has been also a journey with our internal fears or internal perceptions, opinions. In when we are training adults, we say that it's important to review our own perceptions about sex, sexuality, consent, porn consumption. So we needed to do the same because we are asking them to do it. So we needed to do that. And finally, just a quick view of some of the content. As I said, it was important for us to give some global context, like, okay, we need to talk about patriarchy, we need to talk about gender roles, gender stereotypes, we need to talk about inequality system if we want to make a proper approach to consent, sexual education, or porn consumption, or sexualized violence. We needed to talk about diversity, about how about personal boundaries, and about how it is connecting with our own feelings. We need to talk about pornified culture, especially with primary education. We don't talk about porn at the first step, but yes, we talk about pornified culture. And of course, we need to talk about pornography and sexual violence. But as I said, is it clear that this kind of route is important. So thank you very much for your attention. Sorry about my voice.
No worries, I'm sick too. And so that was very, very interesting. And I think this fact of talking clearly and concretely really was a game changer for these whole programs. So now let's move on to the questions that the chat has for you guys. So for both Camila and Laia. And there's somebody that's writing from Croatia that also doesn't have an obligation of sex education and still deals with conservative views when it comes to this topic, so as in Italy. I am wondering, how do you motivate parents and teachers to partake and to include their children in consent programs? Very interesting question.
Yeah, very interesting. It's really, really difficult to involve teachers or parents, so it was really hard also for us. We tried to start with the words of their children, of their students. We tried to underline that children, students have this need, want start a conversation about sexuality with their parents, with their teachers, and this is maybe useful in order to motivate them to join this. Underline that their children want this, their children are asking for this, so it could be a way to motivate them.
Sure. Okay, thank you for your answer. And if anybody has any follow-up questions they want to ask in the chat, please feel free. You are very welcome to do so. Another question for Camilla. It's, what happens if during a conversation with a group of teens, you notice indicators of violence or a child tells you something about their experience? How do you handle that?
Okay, it could happen. We try to talk along with the child, or we try to create a safe space in which he or she can speak about it, and we try to be to listen, to be empathetic, and we suggest he or she to talk about it with a trusted adult in order to manage the situation. We also share this information with the coordinator of the class or of the school, and maybe if it's necessary, we involve also all the school system in order to take responsibility on this situation.
Okay. Thank you. So there's a question for Laia. What was the most surprising input you received from the Youth Advisory Board, or the input that stayed with you the most?
Yeah, I don't know if it was surprising, but I think it's enlightening that they say that sometimes adults or they receive that sometimes adults don't go deeper in that subject. It's like we educate through social messages. For example, okay, no means no, but after that, when they said, okay, when we try to go deeper and when we try to ask other questions, then we notice that it's not possible, that here is where adults start feeling the fear, I guess, or not being enough prepared, and we cannot go deeper in that issue. And so I think it's enlightening, because I think that we have a lot to learn from them and from their contributions in that sense.
Yeah, that is very interesting, because you hear a lot of slogans a lot of the time, and maybe sometimes there's nothing underneath that. That's very very interesting. Yes. And there's another question for whoever of you wants to answer, maybe both of you. And it's, when working with parents, did you notice a difference in readiness between mothers and fathers? Another interesting question.
Well, yes. In involving parents, we see that around the 80%, 85% were mothers. So fathers were just a little part of the group. And the fathers involved in the training were really sensitive, were really ready to speak about these topics. But mothers say that the other part that did not get involved tend to minimize the importance of the topic. Well, it's not so important to speak about sexuality. Sexual education is not so important. So we saw this difference in working with parents, for example. I don't know if Laia has a different experience.
Well, I cannot talk about how they feel prepared, because, as Camila said, the most people who came to the trainings were mothers, some fathers too, but the most people assisted trainings were mothers.
Yeah, that's an interesting data as well. So
Yeah.
Thank you very much. These were all the questions that we had for you. And see you. A reminder, if you have any other questions or even inputs, just thoughts that you might arise during these speeches, please write them down in the chat. We are really interested in hearing them and displaying them. Now we're going to have a very exciting panel, which is going to be led by Martina Fontana. She works at Expat International, is involved in projects at the EU level to promote and safeguard child safety from sexual abuse and exploitation online. She is here today in her role as part of the Youth Advisory Board for the Consent Project, and she is going to moderate this panel that is about the crossroads between empowerment and safety, youth participation for change. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for the introduction. I hope you can hear me well. And also hi to everyone. Like it's very nice to have you here and very excited to lead and listen to our panelists today. So as Lisa mentioned, for this panel, we are going to discuss the topics of empowerment, safety, and youth participation for change, which are essential if we want to ensure healthy relationships among teenagers, and especially when we think about the online world, where children and teenagers, of course, can learn and grow a lot, but the online world also is a place where they can encounter great risks and challenges. So how can we ensure that children and youth feel empowered to learn about and play with sex and sexuality online while also remaining safe? So today with us, we have Caterina Battilana. She is the Vice President and International Project Coordinator at Arci Ragazzi Nazionale, which is an association working with and for youth in Italy. She's also a non-formal educator and trainer on children's and human rights, as well as an anthropologist, translator, and interpreter. We have also Clara Bricoullet. I hope I mentioned the surname correctly. She is the General Secretary for Esplais Catalans, an association working with and for youth in Spain. She coordinates the external relations of the association and the participation of the youth organizations. And from the same organization, so Esplais Catalans, we have also Laia Català. She is the delegate for child protection, support and prevention in addressing cases of child sexual abuse and maltreatment. And she is also the coordinator of the participation of Esplais Catalans in the Consent Project. So thank you very much for being here. Very excited about the conversation. As all panel works, I will ask them a few questions, and then we will not have a Q&A session after this, but if the audience have any questions, you can write them in the chat, and they will probably get back to those via chat. Perfect. So I'd say we start, and I have one first question, and I will ask it maybe to first Caterina and then Laia to complement. If you can tell us how new dating tools and media are affecting the socialization and intimacy among teenagers nowadays. Caterina, if you want to start.
Yep. Happy to be here. Thank you for having us. So we are going to offer a viewpoint, drawing it from our experience, which is rather polyhedric, thankfully. So if that's okay with you, I would like to share my screen for a second. Here we go. There we go. So how dating tools and new media affect socialization and intimacy among teens is two main things that we found. The first one is a massively widespread issue of control, possessiveness, and jealousy are now considered to be normal ingredients for healthy relationships. Namely, people find it normal to force their partners, especially young people, to force their partners to give them access to their social media profiles and accounts, to give them their passwords, and to decide who their partners can and can't follow online. This is now becoming, the new norm, which is kind of heartbreaking when we really think about it, because it's becoming to be, it's getting to be normal for them, for this to be a relationship and a healthy one. The second point we'd like to draw your attention to is the concept of living on life. We have, most of us probably have grown up in a separation between online and offline worlds. And this is probably getting to be outdated. It could be a somewhat outworn approach to approaching these kind of issues, because teenagers today are living life online and offline as very much intertwined between each other. And so they don't really separate what's going on in a virtual realm versus what's going on in a kind of a real realm, in real life. So if, for example, if they have a row or if they have a fight with somebody online, it affects them just as much as if they had it face to face. So yeah, which is kind of again, kind of heartbreaking, kind of new maybe for us. We will talk about more about how we can face these issues.
Thank you, Katerina. This is definitely something that it's worth our attention, and I wonder if Laia, you can actually confirm or add to this.
First of all, thank you for inviting us. We are very glad to be here. And I agree with Katerina. And we think that like dating apps have a direct impact on young people when it comes to socializing and interpreting relationships. This type of apps promote a culture of consumption and immediacy, which can emotionally lead to feelings of frustration, sadness, loneliness. And it's also common for dates or meetings to not materialize, which can generate discomfort and impact on their self-esteem and self-concept. At the same time, these apps allow teenagers to expand their circles of people that interact with and diversify their social interactions. Also, the high use of social networks or dating apps can also impact in the development of social skills. And also, like any other form of socialization that is part of the society, it's not a space exempt from various forms of violence we face daily. Such is the case of sex spreading, which involves spreading sexual photos of other people without their consent. And from our experience, and what we have seen in recent years is that notification of cases of sex spreading are becoming increasingly common. And in summary, technologies play an important role in society and especially in younger populations that offer opportunities to connect and forge bonds with peers, but at the same time are posing a challenge in terms of privacy and exposure to new forms of violence.
Thank you very much, Laia. And yeah, these are definitely critical points, like the interconnection of the internet and the offline world. We have a question specifically about this on the panel, and also like how can we make sure that the world that youth is living in is actually safe for them. And these are critical points. And I think following this, before actually going more into these blurred lines between virtual and offline, maybe Katerina, if you want to tell us a bit, how do you think we can support teenagers in balancing their privacy and safety online? We talked about technology, and this is like a hot debate at the moment. So do you have anything that you want to share with us?
Absolutely. That's okay with you. I'll like to share my screen again.
For sure.
Here we go. Okay, so regardless of how they view the world regarding this issue, teenagers do need support in balancing privacy and safety, as we've discussed multiple times today. So we do need to find new methods, though, because if they are living on life and we are living with a separation between online and offline world, we do need to find new methods and approaches to face and tackle this issue. So if we say that they are normalizing in a way the traits of possessiveness and control and jealousy, it doesn't mean that they are okay with it. They are aware that it's an issue, because otherwise they wouldn't be raising these issues with people and adults, especially that they deem trustworthy. So they are searching for answers, and that is a clear indicator that they are not feeling okay with this new normalization of attitudes, which are deeply problematic. So how do we face this request on their behalf for answers, and how do we help them, and how do we support them engaging with this new kind of on-life world without a negative impact on their lives? we could have better prepared teachers, educators, and alike. I myself am a non-formal educator, so I could obviously imagine myself gaining a better and deeper understanding of this issue, but I'm not sure it would be enough, because if I talk to a teenager, sure, I'm not maybe like in my 70s, I am closer to them with age, but they are talking a different language from me right now. So I'm not really the one they can truly understand. So what we usually do is we go back to peer education and probably new formats, always looking to renew ourselves and find new methodologies. And we find that involving young people and getting them engaged in the issue is actually a key solution to the problem, because some of these young people, teenagers especially, have already lived for a multitude of reasons that they've lived such full lives, and not easy lives at that. And most of these young people are eager and willing to use their experiences for other people to have a better life and an easier life. So going back to peer education is always a key feature for us.
Thank you, Katerina. This is definitely another key point, and this is exactly what we are talking today, like how empowerment of the youth and youth involvement is essential. We cannot just create something for them. We need to get them on board, actually, because they have the most experience, as you said. And now I will ask maybe Laia if you have also some views on this and you want to complement as well.
Yes, well, as we have discussed, the socialization of young people through technology is susceptible to being a risk factor of certain types of violence, privacy, and security can easily be compromised. And we believe that education plays a very important role in the prevention and the protection of children and youth. Our role as as educators, is to promote critical thinking among children and youth, encouraging activities that address that current issues. These interventions should have the aim of providing useful and effective tools that can ensure knowledge to guarantee security, privacy, and minimize the associated risk. We also consider that the spaces and relationships that take place in non-formal education promote open communication and trust, becoming safer spaces for children and young people with a crucial role in the detection and prevention of various risks. These spaces provided by non-formal education also allow meeting the basic needs of interaction among peers, facilitating a balance between online activities and social interaction. Yes, like these spaces foster a healthy relationship between different forms of connection outside the digital realm. Well, and while it's true that the relationship between privacy and security is complex, non-formal education plays a crucial role in the prevention and detection, especially of problematic situations that teenagers and youth might face.
Thank you very much, Laia, for this contribution. Also knowing that Espais Catalans is actually very strong with everything that relates to non-informal education or interaction with you. So I actually suggest you also to visit the two organization websites, so Espais Catalans and Arci Ragazzi. So thank you for this contribution. And going back now to the discussion we were having about the blurred lines between the online, the offline, and then the private, the public, I would like to hear from Clara. How can we actually effectively engage teenagers and empower them to face, but also to reduce the risks associated with these increased blurred lines, so blurred boundaries between these two or four, if you think about the private and the public as well, spaces?
Hi. Well, we think that to actively involve young people, it is important to raise awareness so that they understand the risks they face, increasing their concern about the issue. And this awareness can be promoted through discussions, activities, but it's especially crucial for educators to include an approach to the problem in their training. And from our standpoint, non-formal education is a vital space for raising awareness, especially because youth leaders are often quite young and become relatable figures for the children. Therefore, educators' behavior can serve like a very positive example for the children and youth. And additionally, non-formal education spaces can also empower individuals and promote healthy habits as protective measures. And this helps mitigate and draw attention to risky activities that may lead to privacy violations.
Thank you very much, Clara, for these insights. And we were talking again about the power of informal education and also the importance of raising awareness among things in different ways. So I would ask Katerina if you want to add anything on this.
Absolutely. Yes, so talking about the issue of these blurred lines are something that we all have to face and tackle, whether we work in non-formal education, formal education, workplace. There's no escaping it. So the question here is, how do we engage teens to overcome these risks and be more aware of them? We've obviously discussed the living on life, so they're not segregating online and offline anymore. It's obvious to us, but it's not anymore to them. So we, as educators, we do need to adapt to this new worldview and do what we can to understand it. And in order to foster the conditions for a kind of successful peer-to-peer discussion, I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of examples that we are carrying out currently, and that seem to be really effective, actually. The first experience I'd like to talk to you about is the National Council of Boys and Girls, which has been promoted by the AGIA, which is the National Guarantor Authority for the Rights of Children and Adolescents. And it's a new experience. It's kind of a pilot experience. And these boys and girls are extremely young. So I think the average age is about 13 to 14, so young teenagers. And they come together to discuss issues that they feel are crucial and vital for their upbringing. And sex education seems to be at the top of the list. So they are asking for more resources, more engagement, more information, because they are aware that they are missing a lot of the important things. So that was actually, we were surprised by that outcome. The second experience I'd like to draw your attention to is the CRC group, which is basically the Italian NGO overseeing and actually monitoring the implementation of children's rights all across the country. We, as a CRC group, we issue every year a detailed policy analysis, which is actually a book that comes out every year, which features actually a list of recommendations to our governing bodies, be it a minister, a government, parliament, you name it, we have recommendations for them. The most recent issue was published in 2023, was our 13th edition. And at the end of it, the 10 key recommendations that we put forth for the governing bodies to consider was obviously featuring a more all-encompassing sex education in school, because schools are lacking a thorough education on sexuality and affectivity as well, which is causing all the issues that we've discussed today.
Thank you very much, Katerina. I think a lot of key points to take away with us with this question, especially about the fact that we don't have only, of course, like we need to engage youth and have their participation, but we also need to understand them. So it's also on us to do the work and to understand that we are talking about an in-life experience and not only their separation between the two, and also like peer-to-peer education, informal education. And then maybe we can talk more about the resources. Katerina, you mentioned, for example, so that we would need to give actually youth more resources. They are asking more resources and to learn more about sex and sexuality. So my final question, the final question for this panel would be, how can online resources respond to the natural curiosity of teenagers about sex and sexuality without harming them? And for example, what could be the alternatives to mainstream porn culture? And we have seen what it is at the moment, the porn industry. So very, very challenging and risky. Or for example, how can we create an counter narrative to rape culture? So I will leave the word to Katerina, and then Clara and Laia, if you want to contribute as well.
Of course. Right. So the fact that kids are resorting to porn and porn culture in general is only natural, I think, because there are not enough resources. So I imagine if I'm like a 15-year-old girl who has innate curiosity and wants to find answers, she's going to try and find answers, right? So the only thing that we can control is not their attitude, that because they are acting upon curiosity, and that's only healthy, in my opinion. What we can control is what type of content they find first, what type of content they find engaging. Because if I don't find anything that was tailor-made for me, then obviously I'm going to engage with anything that I can find. So I have a couple of examples here for you. The first one is a website that was created with teenagers in mind, which is called Healthy Peers. Let's see if I can show it to you. Second here. Yes, here we go. Right, so this is a very kind of kid-friendly, teenage-friendly website. It's a portal and it's interactive, so they can literally just go around and explore a few different things. We use this in projects that we've implemented with schools as well. So, and both the kids and the parents and the teachers were actually impressed with the type of work that we did. Basically, scrolling down, there is a sex park that people can explore. And they can find information which is obviously, you know, medically accurate and easy to understand about most topics that you could think of. So they have, here we go, illnesses. They have pleasure. Underneath there is the human body. So we found that this is actually more engaging and people want to interact with this type of thing more so than they do want to interact with porn, because after a while it doesn't really do much for them, to be honest. With our experience, we've managed to see this. And the second resource that I would like to draw your attention to is actually more for educators, possibly. It's a toolkit called Rainbow Resources, which is downloadable, it's free, it's you can find it in a few different languages. You can find them. There's French, Spanish, German, you name it, you have a few. And this toolkit is a toolkit that educators, formal and non-formal, we've tried it in schools, it works great, can use to discuss issues around the topic of gender. Could be sexuality, could be gender identity, could be anything at all. And there's something for early childhood as well, and something for teenagers. And these activities are engaging. They spark a conversation without creating necessarily a problem without putting teenagers at risk, basically. So those are the two main resources that I wanted to share with you. The last thing I'd like to talk to you about is this. Sex education in school at the moment is very much reproduction centered. Maybe they will talk about a little bit about illnesses, about infections that you can contract, but other than that, it's very much reproduction centered. It doesn't talk about pleasure in any way. And the fact that it leaves that topic out is kind of problematic, because kids can see that in the outside world, pleasure plays a major role. So the fact that we refuse to acknowledge the role of pleasure within school, it just means that we are going to lose all credibility in kids' eyes, because they are not stupid. They are aware of the role, the key role that pleasure plays outside of school. So they will keep looking for answers where they can get them. So if within school and within our youth organizations, within whichever educational realm you're thinking about, we stop talking about pleasure, it doesn't mean that kid will stop looking for answers. They will just search for them elsewhere, and preferably they would rather have us not know anything about it. So we can't really control what they do. And again, the only thing we can do is we can control what type of resources we provide to them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with curiosity inherently, but I do think there's something wrong with censorship in a way, if that makes sense.
Of course it does. It makes a lot of sense. And thank you to Katerina for that. It gets to your mind to think that we live in a world that is not reflected in what we teach, for example, at school, when it comes to sex and sexuality, and then we leave it out to children and youth to figure out alone. So thank you also for sharing the two resources. And now I would like to ask Clara what resources you can think of, or like what is your perspective and the perspective of Esplais Catalans?
Yeah, well, as we saw, more and more the online resources are becoming increasingly prominent as sources of knowledge for young people. And as Katerina said, we must assume that it is very difficult to comprehensively control the information that teenagers have access to. So in response to this challenge, we basically promote critical thinking among young people while encouraging activities and training on various aspects related to sexuality with accurate information. And this information should be appropriate to the life stage of these groups based on scientific knowledge and from a diverse perspective that includes sexual and gender diversity, of course. And this includes also teaching teens to question stereotypes, challenge myths, and evaluate the credibility of sources, helping them to develop the ability to discern between reliable and information and misinformation. And for us, it's also very important to establish safe spaces where adolescents feel comfortable to express their doubts and concerns about this topic. For us, non-formal education can play in this way a very significant role. And these spaces can be spontaneous or directed, but in both cases, one of the objectives should be to ensure a non-judgmental and respectful environment. And that's why educators training for us is essential for a successful approach.
Thank you very much, Clara. And I would actually like to thank everyone in the panel. So Katerina, Clara, and Laia for the discussion today. I think one important thing that we can all take away, of course, every detail that we discussed, but the importance of actually speaking and involving youth and children. So to make sure that we work all together and we create a world that is safer for them everywhere. So without the division online and offline, and we are also probably courage to talk about this stuff because they are real. So let's just do our best to figure it out all together. So thank you. We hope that everyone who listened enjoyed, and I think, as mentioned, there was not a Q&A supposed to be, but maybe, yeah.
Yeah, since we have 5 minutes and there were
Perfect.
a couple of very interesting questions, we could go ahead and ask them. So the first one is that it was mentioned that possessive behavior and control is seen by adolescents as part of a healthy relationship. Are there any recognizable differences between male and female teenagers in this respect? Are there any observation as to whether heteronormative and queer relationships differ in this respect?
Well, yes, the possessive behavior and control, I can actually give you a resource in the chat if you'd like to check it out for yourself. It's a report issued by Save the Children, which was published last month. So it was actually very, very recent. And they do discuss all of these recognizable differences that you mentioned between male and female teenagers. And one thing that I can tell you quickly is that what we found, because we have a few psychologists working in schools, they are being reached out to by an increasingly worrying as well number of young girls who are living kind of a first-hand experience of gender-based violence. The example that I was providing before, that, for example, me forcing my partner to give me their passwords and that I need to control what they're doing on their phone, it's usually young boys asking young girls to provide the passwords. But if that's okay with you, I can drop you this resource in the chat, and you can read it if you want. There we go. And if you have any questions about this resource, obviously feel free to reach out to me anytime. As for the second question, okay, no, that's fine. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there is another question. If nobody wants to add anything on this last one, Laio, Clara, no? Okay. There's another question that is about the dating apps. And since most of the dating apps are designed for adults and have a threshold of 18 years old, what role should age verification play? Or the question is, are you panelists talking more about informal mechanisms in the online platforms young people use?
Okay. Okay, so talking from experience, we can refine age verification processes all we want. Kids are always going to find a way to overcome that hurdle and access these platforms. So even when, like, for example, Facebook started out, it had a certain threshold for age that you had to be in order to get on it. And we saw time and time again that younger and younger kids were managing to get on these platforms. So they are not going to stop. We can refine the age verification apps. We can refine the processes of admission. We can do what we want software-wise. It's not going to stop. This is a social issue rather than a technological one. So my suggestion would be, instead of acting on the platform, which needs to be refined and needs to be protected, obviously, as much as possible, let's not forget to also act on the people accessing these platforms. So I can be, again, a 15-year-old accessing a platform for 18-year-old people and over. If I know myself what things are dangerous and what are the things that I need to protect myself from, I'm going to have less and less issues. I promise you that.
Thank you for your answer. I think it was very clear and exhaustive. Does anybody want to add something? Or maybe we should kick off our lunch break.
I totally agree with Katerina. I just wanted to say that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thank you very much for all your contribution. This was a very interesting panel. I think you talked about a lot of different subjects and perspectives on the theme, and a lot of very interesting resources that came out in the end. So I want to thank all of you for being here and for your expertise.